All right, good afternoon, water community. We're in the back half of day one of Solutions for Water Resiliency. And, this is typically during our in-person events where I kind of scour the room and herd everyone back into their seats. I can't do that here, but everyone, if you can hear my voice and you're in your kitchen making something, time to come back to your computer and dig back into the event. Anyway, so we've covered a lot already so far today. Sorry, I just had a buzz there. We got a lot of background chat going on between the operators of this event. A lot has been covered today, and we'll recap later on today, but we've just covered a bunch. But today we're going to shift, this afternoon we're going to shift a little bit, looking at what investors are thinking and what the innovators are doing to kind of create solutions for water resiliency. My name is Scott Kitcher. I'm the president and CEO of Sustain Southern California, which is a nonprofit trade association accelerating clean tech, economic growth, and sustainability initiatives through innovation, collaboration, and education. And for the next 50 minutes, we'll be hearing from four well-known investors in the water space, each of whom plays a slightly different role in the investment continuum, as you will soon learn. We will understand why and how they are investing in water, how they see their roles in water resiliency, and the trends they see unfolding. The format for today will be some investor overviews, followed by a panel discussion. And with any time left, we will read and answer any questions that any of you might have. So please, during the course of our comments here, please type in a few questions for us at the end. Without further ado, I would like to introduce our four panelists, and then we'll kick off the introductions. We have Alex Lukopoulos, who is a partner at Signs Water. He joined Signs in 2005, where he has been an active principal in the firm's private equity practice. Most recently, he was a founding member of the firm's real asset investing platform. Alex has over 10 years of establishing real asset funds, including water, aviation, maritime, colored stones, energy infrastructure, and real estate. He currently sits on the investment committee for Signs Water Opportunities Fund that was launched in 2018. Prior to Signs Water, Alex was part of the founding team of UGO Networks, sold to Hearst, and served as its VP of Corporate Development. Alex also worked as a consultant to Tony Fernandez, the CEO and founder of AirAsia, as well as for NBC in his broadcast of the 28th Olympiad. Alex began his career at JP Morgan as an investment banker, specializing in mergers and acquisitions in Latin America. We also have Deborah Coy, and she's the executive in residence with XPV Water Partners, the largest water-focused growth equity fund in North America. She works with growth companies utilizing her experience as top-ranked investment research analyst and strategic consultant to investors, companies, and municipal utilities. She is a regular speaker and columnist on water industry finance and innovation, and currently serves on the board of directors for Global Water Resources and Willdan Inc. She also serves on the board of directors for Aquaventure Holdings before it was acquired by Culligan in early 2020. Ms. Coy is a well-known in water industry for 20 years on Wall Street as an equity research analyst, where she developed a leading franchise and broad expertise in covering the global water markets for investors at firms including Janney Montgomery Scott, Schwab Capital Markets, HSBC Securities, and National Westminster Bank. Gil Demeter is vice president at Pontifax Ag Tech. He leads the firm's information technology sector focus, and I believe recently is the key guy looking at the water sector. Previously, he was on the investment team for Qualcomm Ventures, where he focused on investment activities in the wireless space, specifically clean technology and IoT. Prior to this, he worked in tech investment banking group at Piper Jaffray, focusing on M&A and debt and equity financings. And finally, John Robinson is a partner at Mazarine Ventures, which is a seed and venture capital group entirely focused on technology innovations that address water or wastewater. John has been in water for over 12 years and has worked across most technology verticals and nearly every end user market, including agriculture, buildings, industry, and utilities. John is passionate about the early stage investing in water. And even though Mazarine is launching a later stage growth fund in September, he intends to remain active in pre-seed and seed investing, where he thinks most of the exciting investment opportunities are. Excellent. Well, there's a quick overview. And with that, I would like to turn it over to Alex Lukopoulos for an introduction of what he does at Signs Water. Alex?
Yeah, hi, Scott. Thank you. Thank everybody for joining and listening to what we have about water and clearly the passion that we all share in solving a lot of the problems that have been mentioned throughout the day. I think, as Scott mentioned, been doing private equity for quite some time, and over the last 5 years have really migrated to build our dedicated water practice, which is Signs Water, and over the last 3 years being completely focused and migrating the firm to focus solely on water. And I'll walk you through a little bit about why, and also why it's so interesting. I think overall, having been in private equity for a long time, you look for ways to really solve problems. And that's really what private equity and investments do. So with water, we first started really looking at it because water is everywhere and everything. And I think one of the biggest challenges as an investor is really how do you focus and how do you make the right decision, because it literally is everywhere. When you talk about water, in earlier in the day, people, it's environment, it's consumer, it's technology, it's healthcare. So one of the things that we've been focusing on for the last several years is really how do you really make sense of it? And how do you make sense of it in an educated way and then actually begin to solve those problems within water? Because we believe it's very easy to get tied up into the sensationalism or focus on one or two things. So what we have done is really try to dissect it down and make sense of it. And the first way we started was looking at what are the four major forces that are driving the water business right now. And again, just in the US, we are a dedicated US water infrastructure fund. The first major force, obviously everyone in California is very knowledgeable of this, is supply demand. Certain places that need the water don't have it. The second is the public sector challenges and responses. They happen to be very different in Northern California, Southern California, New York, New Jersey, wherever they are in the US, it's extremely dispersed. The third, and I think one that has been getting a lot of press recently, is the aging infrastructure. We all know that in the US, the infrastructure is pretty old and getting older, and we need to fix it. And the last one is obviously the environmental and sustainability considerations that are becoming more and more prevalent as we are getting more sophisticated. So we took those major four forces and said, what are some of the themes there? Well, it's fragmentation, right? It's lack of investment, and it's in many cases, because of those two things, it's lack of managerial capabilities that are underpinning that. So we took that and said, where can we add the most value as US water infrastructure investments? And we boil it down to three main themes. The first one is driven by the fact that there's over 60,000 water and wastewater utilities. People have heard this number. It's true. I mean, it's just an untenable number. So we said, okay, that's the problem. How can we solve it? So our first thesis is driven around consolidating small and very small private water utilities. And through that, we've been able to begin to make sense of water as a utility owner. The second theme is in terms of recycle reuse. In California, probably does one of the best jobs in terms of recycling and reusing its water than most states. But frankly, all of the statistics all over the US are well below where they should be. There is absolutely no reason why there are countries that are recycling and reusing so much more of their water. And here in the US, we should be driving that conversation, not being the laggards of it. And frankly, we are. And the repercussions of that are, again, health, environmental, energy. I mean, it goes on and on. So we said, how can we solve this big problem in terms of recycle reuse? The third speaks more to the aging infrastructure. The amount of water that's lost, the amount of money that's needed to fix it is just inefficient and untenable. So the aging infrastructure is a big deal. So we said, let's focus on the core infrastructure of water and specifically the piping infrastructure and the distribution elements that go around that. So having taken the big macro themes, made sense of them, and then focusing on those three areas, we've begun to build a platform which is dedicated to each one of those. And as I mentioned earlier, the biggest issue we believe in this part of the market in water, which is a lower middle market, is the fragmentation. So we are out there trying to build national leading platforms in each one of those three sectors. I would say the way we've approached it is one, because we have not been in the water space for the last 20 years. We've been in the water space for the last 5 years, is really rethinking that. And right now, we believe is the best time ever to really rethink the way water is sourced, water is provided, water is recycled, because frankly, the need is there. Some of the headline numbers that people read about, you need $1 trillion. Well, where is all that going to come from? Some of that has to come from private capital. And we believe that the approach, it needs to be a collective approach that brings together many different pools of capital. And we hope to be one of those pools of capital that goes into this and actually begins to solve a lot of those problems. So it's really, and hopefully we'll talk about in this panel, I think the key to a lot of water investments is really understanding it, rethinking it, and then applying a multidisciplinary approach to solve it. Because unlike many other sectors, it's not just the investor talking, amongst other investors. It's really bringing together engineers, technologists, academia, policymakers, and so including financial people to really come up with the solution. But that's really how we approach it. But I will end with one important point, which is we are extremely excited, not just about some of the macro themes that I talked about, but we believe that now is probably the best time to solve some of these really difficult problems in water, because you have an acceleration event that's going on in many aspects, which is the COVID pandemic. That's accelerating so much in terms of education, in terms of research, in terms of the need for investment. People are recognizing that who's going to pay for all this? Who's going to pay for all these upgrades that need to happen? People are realizing water is an essential service. We need essential workers. We need to do more job creation within water. So you have all these things that we in the past have been holding the innovation in water back, which are now being accelerated. And I'll end with the last one, which is really the data piece. We view data, anything has to do with data, but water more so than anything. But it's really drilling down and applying the right technologies to extract that data and make it useful to solve a lot of those problems. So we view really data as an overlay to all of the infrastructure that we're financing and building and creating. And no conversation in water, frankly, it should incorporate an element of technology and data. And what's happening right now is really accelerating all that. And that's the exciting part, is being able to do that, because with data and the ability to extract it in the proper way, as we'll hear later on from some of the other panelists, is really a way to make it more efficient, make it more scalable, create better treatment, create better monitoring, create better health. And that to us is really a big driver for even additional more value. But it's incredibly exciting to be here. I think it's an incredibly exciting time to be both focused on water, making sense of water, but also really focusing on how data will be an overlay in a lot of these solutions. But we as U.S. infrastructure investment begin on the infrastructure side and then work together on the data side and the technology side to really improve our investments. And also the overarching theme is when you do all of these things, fundamentally, the impact you're having is just tremendous. And that's really what excites us. And again, thank you for inviting me, and hope to dig deeper into some of these issues.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Alex. Yes, truly a collaborative endeavor, and data as an overlay. Thank you for the messages. Deborah, would you care to give us an overview of XPV?
Yes,
and your...
Absolutely. Thanks, Scott. And thanks to Sustain SoCal and the Data Collaborative for pulling this together. I've been very intrigued by some of the work that has been going on out there. I'm based on the East Coast, but tremendous amount of work going on there to pull these issues together, and appreciate the opportunity to give you also my perspective from the investor side. I've been looking at water from an investor perspective for, as you said earlier, a lot of years, well over 20 actually. I think you said 20, it's actually been over 20 now, but it's been interesting to see how it's changed. It used to be that I was a sell-side research analyst, and my salespeople that are trying to sell the research ideas, they're like, why don't you cover a real industry? Like, nobody pays for water. Water's not actually a real investable industry. I think that the thought process around it has started to change. It's very encouraging. It's great to see science coming into the water industry, and Mazarine and the others that are now focusing more on the water sector. XPV started their first fund about a little over 10 years ago, when they first put together a fund to invest solely in water, and raised a second fund. And knock on wood, things go according to plan, will be out raising a third fund fairly soon. And clearly there's a great deal more institutional interest in water. But as Alex said, it really does have to be a focused and sustainable approach, because there is still this overlay of water being a public good. And combined with that, which relates to the rate side, combined with that, there is also, I think, a reluctance and a perception that the industry is not innovative. That's been something that we've dealt with for a long time. I really do think it's starting to change. I think that also, as Alex said, that the pandemic is driving that we're at a very interesting time in terms of, here we are doing digital communication that we never would have thought that we would do before. But we're also seeing an openness to more digital approaches to managing the business as well. And the other piece that I would add to that is that I think that the other thing that's going on in the US now that's really entering this is the overall discussion around social equality and the discussions around injustice and the racial discussion. What does that have to do with water? Well, clearly, the provision of water services is core to health and core to community health. And that's become more apparent as well. And I think it relates to also the workforce issues the industry has been facing, that we've been well behind in terms of attracting talent, particularly attracting tech talent. I think there's, again, there in Southern California, you'd think that with water issues staring everyone in the face, that investors would be falling all over themselves to invest in water solutions, but they typically haven't because they don't see the returns. I think that's starting to change, and I think that we're starting to attract more diversity into the sector, both in terms of workforce, both racial and gender diversity, but also different diverse backgrounds coming into water, and I think that's great for the sector. So I just want to touch on briefly a couple of particularly data areas. As Alex said, and you said, Scott, data is kind of an overlay to so much of what we do in terms of trying to create a more sustainable industry over time. But at XPB, one of the areas that we have seen is looking not just at the implementation of some of these technologies, but taking a step back and looking at some of the enabling technologies directly to make all of this work. And we talked about some of this morning. We talk about more over the next 2 days. Sensors are critical. We're seeing a great evolution in the development of low cost and more highly accurate, moving to real-time sensors across a range of availabilities, and these can be deployed in huge numbers now out in the field. Then of course that generates all this data. And as was discussed this morning, it's so important to not only collect the data, but then clean it up. A lot of talk about the QA, QC part of that, and then put it into data sets that can actually be useful. It's one area that interests XPB a lot. We invested in a company called Aquatic Informatics that actually got their, they got their bona fides doing that for the U.S. Geological Survey, managing, I think it's 16,000 data points, and moving that from what used to be days to collect the data to eventually hours, minutes, and then real time. That company was just acquired by Danaher actually last month. But that's an example of, kind of looking at what the enabling technologies are that will allow us to move to the next, the next level of making this work across a wide range of industries. So I'd love to engage in more discussion about different ways that we can approach that, but just wanted to kick it off with those examples and the point that I think we really are at an inflection point where the attractive investment opportunities in water are greater than ever.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Deborah. That's wonderful news and great to hear, and I completely agree. So moving to Gil Demeter with Pontifax AgTech. Gil?
Thanks, Scott. Hi, everyone. So my firm, Pontifax AgTech, is an AgTech and food tech firm focused on disruptive technologies all across the space. We like to bifurcate this into two broad areas typically, which is life sciences on the one end, which you can think of as gene editing, biologicals, things of that nature. And the other side of the spectrum is information technology. So software, hardware, logistics, infrastructure, anything data related. And we span all across those areas, whether it's food and ag. And, as it relates to that, water, it sort of straddles the two. So, you've got several areas where we have an interest in water because it has to do with ag or it has to do with food. All the other areas are a little bit less interesting for us, but we've been diving into where we can play here, trying to understand it. I'm going to take a little bit of a contrarian approach because we've not made an investment in this space and we're still looking at whether there's opportunity here and where we can play. And a very important aspect about investing in any space is, of course, timing, because you don't want to miss the curve before and you don't want to miss the curve afterwards. And so it's very important to figure out, is this the right time to make a play? From our perspective, I think, we're seeing a couple of trends as we're trying to analyze what to do here. Water tech on the farm is mostly centered around sensing and analysis of the crop's water levels. Most high frequency decision-making is done, as far as we can tell, during irrigation. So this is where it makes the most sense to insert disruptive tech and provide insight on optimal water use and water management. So, theoretically, this would be more on the information technology side, data and hardware, where you could potentially insert some tech. The other perspective that we've seen is that public water scarcity, which is really driven by overconsumption in a lot of places, especially within ag and people hoarding, and a lot of times both producers and suppliers hoarding, and climate change is still a longer term concern. It's probably a little bit less shorter term than you might expect, even though there's a lot of press around water. And I think investment into systemic changes in water supply infrastructure might be pushed later down the road. And this is, again, part of that timing aspect and what we have to figure out. And this is why, what makes a market and whether, it's our bet versus somebody else, whether it makes sense to invest in a technology play now. That doesn't mean that, the water space isn't massive. There's many startups that are creating solutions in the sectors that are, producing water treatment solutions, water quality monitoring, desalination technology, and water use optimization efficiency solutions. These are interesting, but I wouldn't say necessarily new school disruptive tech, which is what we're really interested in. The global water treatment market was $265 billion in 2018, for instance, and it's expected to grow at a nice clip and reach $450 billion by 2026. So it's still a massive market. It's just whether people want to insert disruptive tech, and is it cheap enough? That's what we have to figure out. Is it cheap enough today or tomorrow? And I think probably one of the last points I'll make is that bad management of water can be very costly. And so that's an important tenet that we look for, which is ROI. Something has to have ROI for somebody to invest in technology. And it's got to be incredibly clear ROI. It can't be, some time savings here or there in one or other case study that somebody has mapped and trying to sell a grower on that. Just doesn't have the effect on producers, guys who are just inundated by technology solutions, have to pick between this or that software piece. In the last 5 years, ag tech has blown up. And so farmers are approached by these guys all the time and they have to try to figure out, right, what am I going to choose from? And, unless it has an immediate ROI, maybe something like institute this will get you, 10% labor savings through X, Y, and Z. Right off the top, this is the tagline. It's not, you have to do 10 different variations and employ different pieces that they could hypothetically do themselves without technology. It's got to be incredibly clear. But I think the bad water management, as I said, will be very costly. These unsustainable water use practices, like over abstraction of groundwater in California, for instance, during a drought, can cost the state a ton of money. Almost $3 billion yearly, I believe is the estimate. Maybe that makes this a municipality play versus a grower play then. And again, this is what you have to figure out, because that is still inherently an agriculture technology play, even though you're not approaching a grower, you're approaching a municipality. So, you know, these are all the aspects we're trying to figure out right now. And I am taking a very open mind. For Pontifax, I lead the information technology side. So, you know, this has a lot of applications with water and data. So, you know, I am willing to be impressed and waiting for guys to produce some cool technologies.
Awesome. Gil, thank you very much. So are you also leading the water side of the equation now at Pontifax, correct?
Yeah, so, you know, again, it straddles life sciences and information technology. So just as a function of mostly the plays that you see right now are probably a little bit more on the data side. You know, it kind of varies over the years. You've seen desalination, things like that. I would put maybe a little bit more on life sciences tech, filtration, things of that nature. But now I think it's shifting a little bit more towards the data. As such, I have taken it under my purview to lead the water principled investing for Pontifax.
Okay, well, we got a lot to work on. Thank you very much for that, Gil. Yeah, so now switching to John Robinson of Mazarine Ventures. John, it's a pleasure to see you again. You're looking very relaxed. How are things there?
Yeah, it's a nice, beautiful August day. So why not conduct business from outside? Why not?
I love it.
Gil, I can give you some quick advice about water. Disruptive, the D word. Disruptive in water means digging up the road, and that doesn't make anybody happy. I just, as unsolicited advice, I wouldn't use the word disruptive in water. That's like, might offend people. I just maybe say innovative. Honestly, out of all the industries I've ever worked in, disruptive is like a no-no word in water. But so fortunately, Mazarine isn't investing in water. I know that sounds crazy because we're on this call. We look at 5 industries and we see dollar signs relating to water. First and foremost, agriculture. You can't have a meaningful conversation about water without talking about agriculture, which is the biggest global user of water. And we see dollar signs all over the ag space. Number 2, manufacturing. You can't talk about pulp and paper. You can't talk about a glass manufacturing. You can't talk about extractive industries like oil and gas and mining without having a meaningful conversation about water. Dollar signs everywhere in manufacturing. Thermoelectric power, coal and nuclear. Whole business is water. Public safety and health and urban planning. I mean, whether there's a fire, a shooting, or a water main break, that's all public safety issues. We're investing in public safety technologies, which happen to be what you can't have a conversation about water without talking about the built environment. It's the biggest headache that building owners have. I mean, we're in prop tech. We're in asset management technologies, fortunately, and you see dollar signs everywhere. And then last, but certainly not least, we're investing in health. Water is a health conversation, water quality, and you can't have a meaningful conversation about health or water without talking about the other. So when you look at water, it's hard to see dollar signs, but when you look at it through the lens of these other industries, all of a sudden dollar signs are all over the place. So that's my first point is, it's kind of like our thesis is the water industry expanded, that there's all kinds of opportunities on the fringes that create a more attractive thesis if you look at it through those lenses. My second thing, if you want to sort of see the stuff we're nerding out about, on our website we have a section called Labs, Mazarine Labs, and it's sort of our skunk works where we're kind of like noodling around and playing around with different things. There's not too much detail in there, but you'll see the things that we're spending our days working on, and you'll see words in there like fintech and biotech. And data science and AI. It's stuff that confuses the heck out of people. They're like, why are you doing biotech? I thought you were in water. But once you dig into it a little bit, biotech, fintech, I mean, our investment in Aquaoso is entirely fintech. I mean, all of their customers are banks and insurance. So these other industries are ripe with opportunity. So my second point I just want to share with everybody is we really like the non-invasive sensing play. So traditionally water is like, oh, you throw a sensor here, throw a sensor there. You got to go and check the sensor. You got to calibrate the sensor, cut the pipe, put the thing in there, go and check it. We don't like that. We like non-invasive. We like understanding what's going on with something without even cutting open the body. So in the next 5 years, we sense that if you want to make money in water, looking at non-invasive ways. So there's all kinds of ways to monitor water in pipes, under the ground, from space, by not putting anything in situ. We think that's like in situ monitoring and sensing, it's a good way for billable hours, but it's not really an efficiency play for the end user. So we like the non-invasive play. So that's sort of an area that we nerd out on quite a bit. And the last and final point I'll make that we get pretty nerdy on is decision sciences. It confuses the heck out of other people. They're like, I thought you're in water. What the heck are you doing at a decision sciences conference? But decision support tools and decision sciences and decision systems is ultimately what we're talking about when we're talking about data analytics and predictive and prescriptive analytics, helping owners and operators and occupiers of buildings make smarter decisions about water use and management, ultimately as a decision scientist. So we found a lot of interesting content within the decision sciences world, and we're bringing these things back into water because there's a big market for it. So in summary, we're looking through the lens of other industries to see dollar signs in water. Number two, we like the non-invasive play. And number three, there's just a whole world of decision science software and just nerd tools that are going to grow like crazy in water in the next 5 years. And as Alex, you said, you're in the business of problem solving. We're in the business of betting on the future. I mean, we're so early that our whole worldview is like, where are things going? And we want to bet on those future plays. So thanks for the opportunity, Scott, to be on this discussion. Happy to share.
John, great to have you, and thank you for the comments. And you know, the way you ended that's a perfect segue into a question that I was going to lead off with, really, for all of you. Really, is just generally looking at, and you all touched on this a little bit, but I'd love to hear just to answer on more specifically on water resiliency. So, you as investors, how do you view your role in an effort toward water resiliency, if you don't mind? Maybe Alex, we'll just start with you.
Well, we view our role twofold. One, you know, and I started saying this and John just echoed it, we believe we are problem solvers, right? And our view with water is we want to connect the dots and build the businesses that will solve the issues, because as everyone's mentioned on this, water, you know, it's really easy to get lost in what water means, right? So we view our role as the problem solvers, and in order to do that in water, you need the different skills that I just mentioned. So, with specifically regards to resiliency, it's building those solutions with a clear head on building a scalable business. But resiliency is critical to anything that you do here, right? And that's one of the aspects that we look through in our lens. But I don't think you can talk about water without these, you know, words like resiliency, data, healthcare, environment, jobs, and so forth. So our approach first and foremost is we use those lenses, but we use those lenses in terms of solutions. And our view to those solutions are immediate funding them and building these companies, because we think that's going to unleash a lot of the value that's going to come later on with many of the technologies that John is investing in, or Deborah, or you know, in the future other investors. But that's really it. It's the solutions.
Yeah, very good. And Deborah, your thoughts on that question?
I think it depends on what you mean by resiliency, right? I mean, we talk about resiliency a lot, but when you think about what that really means, it's partly financial. You know, it's really important to have financial sustainability. That's been a key issue for particularly a lot of public water agencies and public utilities, whether they're financially sustainable. So it comes back to operating efficiencies and capital investment efficiencies. Obviously, there's resiliency around the infrastructure itself, drought, floods, you know, that we're prepared for those events and we can withstand them without catastrophic effects. And then I think it's also obviously about the resiliency of the resource itself, which related to contamination, related to supply, and those are different pieces of it. My own thought is one of the most important things for investors to work on is the financial resiliency piece and the financial sustainability of these enterprises, and whether that means, you know, helping the customer to operate more efficiently so that they have the capital that they need to keep using the resource sustainably, or whether that means actually, creating some different approach to take it off their balance sheet or do some sort of a financial partnership. I think that the financial piece of resiliency is really important.
Yeah, I totally agree. And sort of what I anticipated would be the answer. Gil, what are your thoughts on that question?
Yeah, so, I think I agreed on all the points made so far. I thought those are fantastic. I'll take a little bit of a different angle, which is, I think of it from the startup perspective, and I think, to get back to efficiency, you need to have an ecosystem that works properly, and that's always got to include startups, in my opinion. They're evolving, the innovation and efficiency, and you need to plug them where other stale and slow moving companies are not moving forward. And to have efficient startups and ones that get funding, you need to, and I'm going to go back to a point that I had before, have ROI behind these startups. So I think actually a lot of it comes back to, can you find efficient companies to plug those holes? And if you do, and they innovate, then you can build on resiliency. And those companies need to show an ROI. If they don't, then it's not worth funding, and you won't come up with a longer term solution for something like this, because, all the sectors that innovate survive, all the ones that don't, get behind.
Thank you. Just be careful. Don't use that word disruptive. Okay, Gil? It's just
good point. Yeah.
All right, yeah. All right. And so, and John, your thoughts on that same question?
Just quickly, we know what sustainability means. We know resiliency means. We see those as academic, corporate, nebulous sort of terms that feel good. You go to conferences, they talk about sustainability and resiliency. But you know what? A city planner, an operator of a building, a farmer, they go back to their desk and all they have is failure. I mean, the whole business is failure. Whether it's too much water, too little water, the system has just failed. And then on a 1 to 5, is it failed? 5, about to fail 4, 3, looking pretty bad, 2, okay, and 1, just put it in, it's fine. I think once you look in terms of failure on the quantity side, and the quality side, lead in the pipes, PFAS, microbial contamination, it's all just failure. And so once you talk in terms of failure, people sit up in their chairs a lot straighter and they reach for their checkbooks. And and the likelihood of failure, LOF technologies is an area where hunting around for LOF software that enables owners and operators to identify where are we on the 1 to 5. Well, the guy who's out there looking, he's like, yeah, it's a 5. I know, I was just out there, the thing's failed. Thanks for telling me that. But knowing if it's a 2 or a 3 and how to prevent it from becoming a 4, that informs your budgeting, that informs your CapEx, your OpEx. So we think in terms of failure. I know that sounds like cynical and whatever, but people sit up in their chairs straighter when you talk failure. And when you say resiliency, people leave the conference and they go back to their desks and they think, oh, this nice conference, they talked about sustainability. So that's our worldview on it. And we're actually thinking about doing a failure conference, which kind of makes me laugh because it's going to be a total failure. I don't know if we'll pull it off because it seems a little too cynical. And I know your name is Sustain SoCal, Scott, so sorry to be so jaded, but like the word failure is very powerful when you're talking about water and wastewater. And Flint was a failure. And the flooding along the Mississippi, total failure. There should not be so much flooding. And so once you think of it in that way, then you start to think about how to prevent failures and how to bring failures back from the edge. And that's where we think that there's an opportunity for investing in such technologies.
John, I think if you call your conference a Disrupt conference, you can ensure the failure for it.
I'm sorry to be so contrarian. I just, it's trying to bring some.
Well, another way to look at failure is that, in the world of innovation, you fail fast, right? So you can learn from that, grow from that, move on to the next thing. Same line of thinking. I think there's a lot to be said for that, John, actually. So let me see the notes on that conference. I might be interested. So let's move on.
Something I will just interject one thing there. I've heard the fail fast thing a lot at water conferences, and people from utilities, and we probably have some listening to us, they're like, no, we can't do that. We'll kill people. So there's an objection to the whole concept.
I agree with you, Deborah. And I'm not saying fail fast. I can't stand the term fail fast. I'm talking about the city of pick a city. They get to their desk on a Monday morning and they have failure all over the place. And they want to talk in terms of failure. I'm not talking about the fail fast thing, which I can't stand. I'm just talking about having conversations with owners and operators to talk about when things are likely to fail, which gets into predictive analytics. This thing's going to fail in 6 months and 6 days. That is a powerful technology. And if you can bring that to people and tell them when something needs to be maintained and how to prevent it from going to 4 to 5, that's what I'm talking in terms of failure. It's sort of informing predictive analytics.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense to me. And I think the fail fast, I think in this connotation would mean fail before it gets to market, right? Fail before you actually have a product. So earlier on in the whole process of the company. So let's get a little more granular maybe on where we are currently in our current state of the economy and COVID and where we are right now. And I'm curious to know from all of your perspectives, and clearly you're all still very bullish on the water market, otherwise you wouldn't be here. But how do you see this potential developing economic recession, the recession, impacting water investment and how you are reacting to that? So let's go around the horn again. Alex, you want to take the first stab at that?
Yeah, as I said in my opening statement, the situation right now, whether you call it COVID, recession, what have you, who knows what's happening, it's an accelerating event. The macro trends in water and the dollar signs that people see, but the problems that we see and the failures and the solutions are everywhere in water, and they were there before. This is accelerating a lot of, I think, what some of the problems, what some of the hindrances were, and it's also accelerating what some of the solutions are, which are using new technologies, a new labor force coming in. So we are viewing this very much so as an accelerating event. And if you have a knowledge and if you have a point of view and you have a specific thesis, I think that for us at least, this is an immense opportunity, and one that as an individual investor, but as an individual who really believes in sustainability and impact, this is something that we have to do right now, because if we don't solve it, it's not going to get solved with this accelerating event. And by accelerating event, I'll give you some examples. I mean, people need to become more digital. Utilities, some will continue to do what they've been doing for 20 years, but others won't, because there's either a shift in ownership, shift in generational, shift in management, which is happening in light speed. And so that's what excites us. On the investment side, in many of our, in our utilities that we're acquiring, the private utilities, many of the public ones are coming to us now because the government's realizing I just don't have the money, and I will never have the money. So I need to start working with other constituents, including private capital, including philanthropic capital, and the list goes on. So you are seeing a tectonic shift in what's happening right now because of this, just like you are in many other industries. But as I think Gil pointed out, I mean, the water industry is massive. So you're seeing an even bigger tectonic shift. But again, the key is really to be focused, to understand, to not get sidetracked, and really, at the end of the day, put the right pieces together. And John, just one note to you: if you're going to, I'd be happy to talk if you call the conference "Do Not Fail" conference. I think that's what we're all striving for is let's not fail, because I don't think we can fail. And it is our ability not to do that right now. And with what's happening, it's even more relevant, even more opportunistic, but even more up to us to do it. And that's what it's just insanely exciting.
Predicting failure. It's not do not fail. Predicting failure is the idea. Knowing when something's needs to be maintained.
Yeah. Making sure. Yeah, absolutely.
So Deborah, your thoughts on that question?
Yeah, I'm a little concerned, to be honest, having lived through some prior recessions. We tend to see water being a lagging indicator. And I agree with Alex that we're seeing some accelerating events that will be very beneficial over time. But I think there will be some changes that will certainly going to make investors have to think twice. We're seeing municipalities and frankly, not just water related, but more broadly, a lot of financial pressure that they're facing. I think it's going to impact budgets, not so much this year, but next year and the year after, that probably makes them more cautious on traditional investing in infrastructure. Nevertheless, despite the failure that we've talked about, or the potential failure that we've seen, for the most part, water utilities and wastewater utilities have come through this pandemic despite workforce disruptions with flying colors. We haven't seen water outages. We haven't seen, wastewater failures. They've really done pretty well, and they're expected to continue to do that. I think they're going to be squeezed. I think the pressure is going to be greater than it already has been over the next couple of years on the public sector side. And what that means is that they're going to have to get more innovative and more creative to fulfill their mission. So that creates an opportunity for those of us who are looking at innovations. And I hope, Gil, you find a disruptive one to invest in, because I think the industry is really due for it. It's really due for rethinking how we approach mega. California is a great example of the history of water versus the future of water, which is we shipped water down from Northern California, and we have these massive reservoirs and massive aqueducts and underground systems, and it's tremendously expensive from an infrastructure standpoint. It's tremendously expensive from a energy standpoint. We really could do so much better if we had lots more on-site reuse as opposed to big mega infrastructure. I mean, I think there's really some interesting opportunities if we can get to the point where they really take an open mind toward doing it. So I think it's going to be an interesting couple of years.
Thank you, Deborah. Yeah, John, your thoughts on that?
COVID. I mean, we'll return to some sense of like business trips and field work and visits to stuff, but like nothing like before. And I think that the concept of telehealth is a trend that all of us know about testing your health at home without going to the clinic or the hospital. I think within water, the field work that consulting engineers have done over the last, since is not going to come back like it used to. So the self-reliance that utilities and industrial and any building owners, you're going to have you have the tools to manage the day-to-day firefights on your own. And that means you've got to have visibility into what's going on in the water quality and quantity, which means a major demand for, let's just call it self-resiliency tools. Mm-hmm. So that, I mean, if you look at banking, and this is going to sound crazy, but if you look at banking, an old conservative industry, guess what happened? FinTech. Now all of us check our accounts and transfer money on here. It just has created efficiencies for the customer like crazy. Look at the travel agency industry. When was the last time you called a travel agent? You do it all yourself. So within water, the ability to, the convenience tools so that the owner operator can just manage what's going on their own. Don't need the consulting engineer coming out to do field work. Look, for bigger issues, we'll call the doctor for surgery, but for day-to-day stuff, we got it. And most importantly, if you're overseeing your building or your plant or your farm, predictive becomes everything. You got to know when things are going to break, getting back to the likelihood of failure thing, and you got to know what's coming. Prior to this, call the engineer, call the consultants, they'll come out, they're problem solvers, they'll come out and solve the problem. But now that it's on your watch, the demand for predictive tools is higher than ever. And so COVID has not only accelerated things, it's created the need for more self-resiliency tools. If you're managing a building, managing a farm, managing a plant, or managing an industrial plant or mine, you got to be able to operate without the help of a consulting engineer, because the field work is just, during COVID, it's not there, and it's not going to come back like it used to be. So that's an opportunity right there.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, thank you, John. I mean, interesting comments. And Gil, your thoughts? We only have like a minute left. What are your thoughts, Gil?
Yeah, I think COVID will definitely accelerate things. I think that's hard to argue with. I don't have a sense for how much. I don't think it's as drastic as you might hope or align it should be with how much people should care about sustainability in water and resiliency in the long term. But I do think it will be accelerant. I don't know, maybe it'll be a 25% accelerant versus what you might expect to be 100%. I have seen other industries where it's been 100% accelerant. I mean, and I think all of you guys probably have as well, but I haven't seen, people flying off the hook to, secure water during this time period necessarily. But we'll see.
Yeah, thank you, Gil, very much. And so as we sort of move into our next session, and I know that all of you investors have agreed to join us for the Innovator Showcase, which I'm very excited about. As we sort of transition, if you wouldn't mind just maybe a quick closing, if you have any last minute thoughts kind of on what we've just discussed, we'll just use that as kind of a segue into the next session. Alex, please go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think the key is, as you can tell from my enthusiasm, I think there's no better time to be in water, whether you're an investor, an owner operator, a manager, an operator, or a policymaker, because now we've looked at many sectors over the years, many ups and downs, but there is such strong macro trends and such strong need to solve the problems right now that it's an amazing opportunity for so many people. And the one part that excites me about water more than anything is the fact that it brings together so many of these different constituencies. It is a multidisciplinary approach. It's not one person going to solve it. It's going to come together with all that. So whoever's listening, encourage you to continue to rethink it, to focus on it, to educate yourself, and then at the end of the day, solve it. Whoever is interested in learning more about what we do, please reach out.
Deborah?
Yeah, I'd just like to say thank you for all the work you've done to all the innovators we're about to hear from. It's hard work in water. Everybody wants to go into the next tech app, but not. I'm so delighted to see so many great innovators coming into water. It's very exciting, and I'd like to just say, keep doing it. Go water.
Awesome. Agreed. John?
I'm just looking at John Higley popped up on my screen right now. He's an outsider. He comes from the oncology world. He's a cancer researcher who came over the fence into water to solve problems of aquatic invasives in lakes. That's what makes me excited. And I love the fact that there's outsiders coming into water at a rate that we've never seen before. So Deborah, go water. I love that term. Maybe that somebody should buy that website and do some.
Or we could make that a conference.
Go water.
Yeah, go water. That'll be the follow on to this event. Gil, what are your final closing thoughts here?
Yeah, no, I appreciate you guys pulling it together. I'm looking forward to listening to some of the startups come over here, and I am looking forward to finding some innovative tech in water, and hopefully soon.
Awesome. All right. Go water, go team. Panelists, investors, thank you very much for your time. I look forward to rejoining you in about 20 minutes after the innovators have finished their pitches.